Unprecedented pressure on the NHS as patients wait on trolleys for treatment in England and routine operations are postponed. The Health Secretary faces calls for action.
NHS staff deserve better. Patients deserve better. The government needs to do better. Can I urge the Health Secretary, get a grip?
Social care is in crisis too. 18 months after pledging an end to 15-minute care visits, we reveal thousands are still taking place.
People are having to make choices. Do you go to the loo or do you eat or drink? I mean, that's a choice that nobody in the United Kingdom should have to face.
Also tonight, political deadlock in Northern Ireland. Martin McGuinness quits as Deputy First Minister. Europe's big chill. At least 20 die as temperatures dip to -20. Meryl Streep's Golden Globes attack on Donald Trump.
When the person asking to sit in the most respected seat in our country imitated a disabled reporter, it kind of broke my heart.
This is the ITV Evening News with Mary Nightingale.
Good evening. The Health Secretary Jeremy Hunt tonight spelled out the unprecedented pressures facing England's NHS, saying demand is at an all-time high and this winter has seen the busiest day in the service's history. But he denied there was a crisis, telling MPs there are serious problems at only a handful of trusts. Labour insists he needs to get a grip as across the country hospitals struggle to cope. Here's our Deputy Political Editor, Chris Shipp.
If you haven't witnessed firsthand the sort of pressures England's NHS has been under, then this patient's mobile phone footage gives us all an alarming insight. This is the Royal Blackburn Hospital around the new year. Bed after bed lined up in a corridor, patient after patient waiting to be seen.
The most sick patients will go straight into resus here. They'll come in through the ambulance.
Blackburn's medical director allowed us to film in the A&E department today.
There are actually 4 ambulance trolleys waiting now to be seen.
Busy, he admits it is, even full on some days, but the hospital, he says, is coping.
We were full by New Year's Day, and since then, so what we've been doing is we escalate then into further escalation areas. We open up our day case units and other units to take the extra patients, and then we have to put extra staff on to do that.
But Blackburn is not on what's called black alert. Other hospitals, however, are. Nottingham University Hospital's issued a black alert today because it's suffering from the most severe pressure. In Hull, routine operations are being postponed, and in a Croydon hospital, a children's ward is being used to treat adult patients. And as opposition MPs demanded an urgent injection of money, the Health Secretary hinted the 4-hour waiting target in accident and emergency may need to be looked at again.
Looking to the future, it is clear we need to have an honest discussion with the public about the purpose of A&E departments. If we are going to protect our 4-hour standard, we need to be clear it is a promise to sort out all urgent health problems within 4 hours, but not all health problems, however minor.
NHS staff deserve better. Patients deserve better. The government needs to do better. Can I urge the Health Secretary, get a grip?
Yeah. England's A&E departments had the busiest day ever on the Tuesday after Christmas, but some medics say that the pressure is coming from urgent cases, not from those with minor conditions.
We would caution the Secretary of State that actually our main problems are not with the patients with minor illness, but with the patients with major illness who require admission to hospital and which unfortunately they are not able to get.
Nevertheless, medical staff and politicians insist A&E is only for emergencies at any time of year, but particularly at this time of year.
So Chris, then, just how big a problem is the government facing over the NHS?
Well, Mary, I think unlike other areas of government policy, say trains or police or something, the NHS is an area that we all, nearly all of us, interface with every year. We all have some experience of it. Now, stories like this, therefore, can be particularly dangerous for the government. It's true to say that, you know, most people's experience of the NHS is better than their perceptions, better than their expectations. But, you know, you can't ignore statements from across the country. This one's from Leeds Teaching Hospital, talking about why they've had to cancel a number of planned operations. This one's from Croydon about why they're using a children's wards to treat adults. Even in Wales, they say performance is as bad, if not worse, as England. As for this sort of 4-hour wait time that we were just talking about, Jeremy Hunt's office insists it's all about getting people to use the right bits of the NHS, GP surgeries, 111 phone calls. But it sounded to me, Mary, like he was preparing the ground to change these 4-hour waiting targets.
OK, Chris Shipp at the House of Commons, thank you. And it is not only hospitals that are in crisis. ITV News has seen evidence of how thousands of social care patients are being failed. The Leonard Cheshire charity says councils in England are ignoring guidelines to end home visits that are so short that some patients are having to choose between getting a drink or even using the toilet. Well, our health editor Rachel Younger has this exclusive report.
I felt sorry for him when he had that mattress.
This isn't how anyone plans to grow old. John has terminal cancer. Dorothy's sight and mobility are all but gone. The little dignity they have left relies on carers getting them washed, dressed and fed. Try doing all that in 15 minutes.
Some are running in and they're doing as many three houses in an hour. Makes me cry, it makes me upset. You know, we can't make a drink, you know, we can't make a sandwich. I can't stand up to butter bread now.
Dorothy was once a nurse at Oldham Hospital, John an engineer. They were useful then, now they feel discarded.
You just feel like nobody cares at all.
Do you feel abandoned, John?
Well, wouldn't you? There's nothing, nobody, you've gone past your sell-by date.
Oldham Council has now moved the Fogs to a new care provider who sticks to the 30-minute minimum. Not before time, because in April 2015, the government accepted statutory guidance that said 15-minute care visits were no longer acceptable. Yet a Freedom of Information request from Leonard Cheshire Disability and ITV News to all 152 councils in England showed 34, that's 1 in 5, are still commissioning 15-minute visits for personal care. Meaning over 16,000 people are still receiving so-called flying visits for intimate needs such as washing, dressing and eating.
For the 873,000 adults in England who rely on social care, the new guidelines were meant to offer a fresh beginning. Instead, what you get seems to rely increasingly on where you live or what you can afford, rather than on what you actually need.
In London, this stroke survivor, who wants to remain anonymous, says her visits are often cut to just 15 minutes, and on 2 days last month, she didn't get one at all.
I couldn't get up and get dressed and eat and drink, other than any drinks that I happened to have by my bed. I can't really get to the lavatory on my own, and as each day progressed, I got weaker and weaker because I wasn't eating.
Many charities believe the lack of resources is a scandal.
People are having to make choices. Do you go to the loo or do you eat or drink? I mean, that's a choice that nobody in the United Kingdom should have to face.
Yet right now, in homes across England, some of the most vulnerable continue to receive the least dignity.
I mean, it really is horrifying, isn't it, Rachel? You spoke to the Health Secretary about this. What did he say?
Well, he seemed genuinely shocked by these figures because there's been widespread acceptance that this is no way to deliver compassionate care, but also because I think that he, better than anyone, understands the impact failings in social care have on our already overstretched hospitals.
Well, it makes me very angry because, you know, how can you possibly look after someone's entire care needs in just 15 minutes? And, you know, when you look at the pressure in our hospitals, people then ending up in A&E departments, which frankly are the worst possible place if you're old and if you're confused, if you've got a condition like dementia, you don't want to be in a busy A&E department. And if we could look after you better at home or indeed in a care home, that is a much better place for you to be. I don't want to pretend it's easy, but we must not compromise on giving decent, basic care to people who need it.
You believe some are failing in terms of management rather than funding?
Some could be doing better, but I don't want to pretend that, there isn't pressure faced by everyone. And if we look at what the best places are managing to do, they're having no delayed transfers out of hospitals. They are giving good social care packages. There are Labour councils and Conservative councils that are increasing funding for social care, increasing the number of people who are getting supported by the social care system. And we need all authorities to be following their example.
OK, but just to pick up on that, did he not recently announce that he had given councils permission to raise more cash for this?
Yeah, that's right. And in fact, it was to point the finger at some local authorities, suggesting they need to pull their socks up. And that's because although every local authority is able to raise council tax by 3% to help pay for its social care, that delivers a lot more money in places like the home counties, where property prices are more expensive, than it does in places like Oldham. And our research found that there is a correlation between those areas able to raise the least money and those who are now having to resort back to 15-minute visits. And just to put this into context, the head of NHS England, Simon Stevens, has made it clear that even if the worst performing local authorities are able to match the performance of the very best councils, even then, he says, there is still a need for extra funding to be given to social care in England. OK. All right, Rach, will you stay with us? We're going to talk a little bit more in a minute or two. But in the meantime, earlier, Theresa May set out her plans to improve the treatment of mental health sufferers and combat the stigma that they often face. The Prime Minister pledged that by 2021, no child would have to travel away from their local area for treatment. But as our national editor Allegra Stratton reports, little new money was actually promised.
Since Ollie was 9, he's had mental health problems.
I was going mad inside, literally. It was like being inside a prison in your head not long ago.
He wasn't diagnosed until some 15 years later. In that period, he tried to take his life 4 times.
Then that was the best thing to do in my eyes, and I was a burden to everyone else.
Today, the Prime Minister unveiled new support for mental health, with a special emphasis on young people like Ollie.
The burning injustice of mental health and inadequate treatment that demands a new approach from government and society as a whole. This starts with ensuring that children and teenagers get the help and support they need and deserve. Because we know that mental illness too often starts in childhood, and that when left untreated, it can blight lives and become entrenched.
As part of the changes, the Care Quality Commission will lead a major review of children and adolescent mental health services in England. Mental health first aid training will be offered to secondary schools. There will also be new trials to strengthen links between schools and local NHS mental health staff. Theresa May today pledged the mental health budget would be monitored to stop raiding by the cash-strapped NHS, but she added little new money to the pot.
Essentially, without additional funding, we are talking about changes at the fringe. We're not talking about the substantive change that the Prime Minister has promised.
Many wanted new money as well as new policies.
When you're losing the will to live, you don't want to be waiting then to be put to the wrong person or them persons to not have the funding for you, you know.
And did that happen to you?
Yeah, that's happened to me. Yeah, I've still not had any therapy yet.
But perhaps today another step taken to stop future young adults going undiagnosed. Allegra Stratton, ITV News.
So whether it's mental health, social care or NHS hospitals, it is all about money, isn't it? And is there any more going to be coming anytime soon?
Well, much of it does come down to money. And whether you're talking about Jeremy Hunt, who was today saying that he would try and provide more care beds so that people could be discharged out of hospital, or whether it's Theresa May promising to improve child mental health services, there is no new money coming at the moment from the Treasury. And there is already a challenge getting some money that isn't ring-fenced to where it's needed to go. For example, the government promised £1.4 billion for children and adolescent mental health service. There are concerns it isn't getting to the front line because many hospital trusts are facing deficits of millions of pounds that they're having to plug. So while it is fantastic and promising to see the Prime Minister championing mental health, There are questions over whether she understands yet the real crisis in social care in particular, where the three leading health think tanks in this country think that by next year, the gap between what's available for social care and what we actually need is reaching £1.9 billion.
Terrifying, isn't it, Rachel? Thank you very much indeed. And you can join a debate on the NHS as well as sharing your experiences, good or bad. Go to our facebook.com and search for ITV News. We would love to hear from you. Still to come on the ITV Evening News. Europe's big chill. Temperatures drop to -20. And the night manager sweeps the board for the Brits at the Golden Globes. Those stories and more after the break. Welcome back. Sinn Féin's Martin McGuinness has tonight resigned as Deputy First Minister of Northern Ireland, making fresh elections almost inevitable. He says he was forced to act after the First Minister, Arlene Foster, refused to step down over a botched energy scheme. Mark Mallet is in Belfast for us tonight. So, Mark, why has he acted now?
Well, you know, Mary, we have talked about these crises over the last number of years, about flags, about political emblems, about paramilitary activity, but who would have thought that it would be a renewable heat incentive scheme that would bring Stormont to its knees? Let's have a look at the background to this. Arlene Foster, the now First Minister, pictured here with Martin McGuinness, was in charge of the Economy Department in Northern Ireland back in 2012, and she introduced a renewable heat incentive scheme. The problem with that scheme was that it was very flawed. It enabled people to burn and also to earn money while burning these renewable sources. It's been dubbed the cash for ash scandal. Well, since the flaws came to light, Sinn Féin have been leading the charge for the First Minister to step aside, allowing for an investigation to take place. She refused to do that. Sinn Féin are saying enough is enough. It now seems likely that we're heading for an Assembly election, a brutal campaign also likely too. The solutions to the problems, not so likely.
All right, Mark Mallet in Belfast, thank you. Two men have been arrested after a teenager died from a severe allergic reaction after eating a takeaway meal. 15-year-old Megan Lee from Lancashire died on New Year's Day. The men are being held on suspicion of involuntary manslaughter by gross negligence. And millions of commuters in London have had their journeys disrupted today as tube staff staged a 24-hour strike. The action, part of an ongoing dispute over cuts of staffing and facilities, caused severe traffic jams and long queues right across the capital. Now, the big chill gripping continental Europe has now claimed more than 20 lives. Icy temperatures and heavy snow have frozen rivers, grounded planes and caused many traffic accidents. Sally Lockwood reports.
Heavy snowfall and freezing temperatures have come as a shock to southern Italy, and as it sweeps Europe, it's claiming lives. At least 8 people have died in Italy alone, the homeless most at risk. Rome's famous fountain in St. Peter's Square reveals the extreme cold. In Greece, refugees on the island of Lesbos are even more vulnerable than before. Their makeshift homes shelter from the snow, but little comfort from the cold. At least 12 people have died in Poland. As its temperatures plunge to below -20, the Vistula River in Warsaw is covered in ice. And in Romania, the Black Sea has frozen over for the first time in 5 years. Turkey hasn't escaped either, with accidents on the now treacherous roads and hundreds of flights cancelled. Istanbul's iconic blue mosque now dusted in white. And from here, the icy temperatures and snowfall stretch as far as Belgium. Sally Lockwood, ITV News.
And with sub-zero temperatures predicted here by the end of the week, we'll have the latest forecast straight after the programme. And finally tonight, the extraordinary public row between the Hollywood star and the president-elect. When Meryl Streep collected a special Golden Globe last night, she used her speech to attack Donald Trump. She called him a bully. He took to Twitter to call her overrated. And even one of the many Brit winners got in on the act, as our arts editor Lena Nanar reports.
Meryl Streep
Three-time Oscar winner Meryl Streep had won the most prestigious prize of the night, but it was the man who won last November who was to dominate her speech. President-elect Trump may not have been watching, but Streep had watched him on screen when he impersonated a disabled reporter during his election campaign.
It was that moment when the person asking to sit in the most respected seat in our country imitated a disabled reporter, someone he outranked in privilege, power, and the capacity to fight back. It kind of broke my heart.
This was the moment during a rally 15 months ago.
Poor guy, you got to see this guy. Oh, I don't know what I said. I don't remember.
It was widely criticised at the time. Hours later, Donald Trump took to Twitter in an extraordinary fight back. Meryl Streep, he wrote, one of the most overrated actresses in Hollywood, doesn't know me, but attacked me last night at the Golden Globes. She is a Hillary flunky who lost big, adding he'd never mock the reporter's disability. British actor Hugh Laurie, awarded for playing a corrupt billionaire in The Night Manager, also couldn't resist the opportunity.
To the many, many people who gave me this wonderful, extraordinary, once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, I accept this award on behalf of psychopathic billionaires everywhere.
War is spectator sport.
Laurie's was amongst 3 British acting honours for the TV adaptation of John le Carre's spy novel.
Tom Hiddleston, The Night Manager.
Tom Hiddleston and Olivia Colman picking up the other 2 awards. And victory for Claire Foy in The Crown, winning for her portrayal of a young Queen Elizabeth.
Do you suppose I might borrow it for a couple of days, just to practice?
Borrow it, ma'am? From whom?
She has been at the centre of the world for the past 63 years, and I think the world could do with a few more women at the centre of it, if you ask me.
City of stars, are you shining just for me?
After all the politics, it was a good old-fashioned romance that won the day. The film La La Land, opening here later this week, was the big winner of the night with 7 awards, a Hollywood musical no less, offering nostalgia in a tumultuous year. Nina Nanar, ITV News.
And that is all for now. Tom Bradby will be here with news at 10, but from me and from all the Evening News team, have a great evening. Bye-bye.